Thank you everyone for coming to this room with no natural light. Well, it's beautiful outside. So this is how computers scribble. So first, who's this guy? Why should you care? So my name is Alvin. I'm a developer advocate. I work for a company called Yoto. We make a player for children. It's not what this talk is about, but if you want to talk about this later, I have like samples and we can do this. But this is about how computers scribble, meaning if you want to draw things, if you want your computers to scribble, and all you have is a grid of pixels, and all you can do is draw lines. Now, how do you go from that to like some of the more modern things that we have today, right? So there's a lot of things we could cover, but we'll limit this to just how computers draw with the pencil tools, the pen tool, and then drawing text. So because we could go about a million different things, but we have 15 minutes, so let's just keep it nice and simple. So we start with the pencil, right? So pencil means this. Like we've used this on Figma, on Snapchat, or TikTok, whatever you want to, whatever you use. So, but what happens is you'll notice that when you draw, it's not when you release your mouse, it's not doing exactly what you did before. It kind of makes everything a lot smoother, right? So how does it work? How could we go about recreating that? Because remember, all we have is lines, right? So the naive way would just be to, every time you move your mouse, just register a point, and then add these points to an array, draw a line between all these points, right? So if we try that, it kind of doesn't look right. Like I'm drawing all the points so you can see them a little bit better, but it's still kind of jagged, right? It doesn't look super smooth, right? So we could try to remove the points that maybe are too close, to avoid maybe some of that noise like in the corners, right? But it still kind of doesn't look right. Like if you remove these points, if anything, it becomes even more angular, right? Does this guy want to come? We don't know. Okay, all right. So what if there was a way to go through all these points, but still make them smooth? You don't want to add too many points, like go a bit rogue, but you just want to keep the points you already have, but just make everything a lot nicer, like what you're expecting today, like on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Figma, on whatever. So just to lighten the mood a little bit, can anyone tell me, apparently it's a conference with like developers, who's the person in the middle? Steve Jobs? Okay. You can tell me who's the person on the left? Who? Wozniak? No. Who's the person on the right, maybe? Okay, so in order to talk about this, we need to talk about Pixar briefly. So the person in the middle is Steve Jobs, right? Who back in the day bought Pixar. And Pixar was this obscure division inside Lucasfilm being run by these two guys. The guy on the left, again, is a guy named Ed Catmull, who ended up being the president and CEO of Pixar and stayed there for about 30 years. So that was Pixar initially when they bought it. So these two guys were, just doing computer graphic stuff, like doing this image computer stuff you can see, and they inventing a bunch of stuff. One of the, I guess, most prominent things they came up with was the alpha channels, meaning you could have transparent images, and something is broken. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't matter. Something that doesn't work. But what they did as well is they wrote an obscure paper. So this Ed Catmull wrote an obscure paper in the 70s that was doing exactly what we want, which is created a class of curves that do exactly what we want. And this paper, even though it's from 1974, I still can't access it today, which is infuriating. But anyway, he made up this curve called Catmull-Rom, which is the third one. And you can see this is still like available today. This is from D3.js. And you can see if you give it a bunch of points, it goes through all of them, and it keeps it very smooth, but also goes through all the points, because compared to other ones, you can see either they don't go through or they just add a bit of freedom or a bit of stuff. So this is how you do it. And it, again, is still used today in graphs. So if you have so this is from another front-end library in Svelte called LayerChart, which lets you still, again, the new library still lets you today use this Catmull-Rom curve if you want to make a chart, go a little bit more, a little bit rounder, a little bit smoother. If you want to do some kind of smooth movement, if you have a train, you want to make it move around the rail track, also use a Catmull curve, very, very nice for that. But basically, the code looks like this. You don't have to understand it, just trust me, it works. But if you give it a bunch of points, run a curve through it, it curves. So that's the end for pencil. Now, the next tool I want to talk about is the pen tool, right? And by pen tool, what do I mean? I mean the thing that we see, like this is more on the professional end. So in Figma, in Illustrator, and whatever. And so with a pen tool, you draw a bit differently, right? You have these handles. Like this is not like you move your mouse and then something happens. You move your mouse and then you move a bunch of handles and then something curves. And something become, scribble, the things you see in illustrations and all that. Now, how does it work? Well, you can try to see at a midpoint and see if it curves, but that's not it, right? Because it's not what we have. It's this set of extra handles that give you control, over these curves, right? So as I said, it's not quite that. We want these handles, and we need to figure out how they work, right? And that's called the Bézier curve. Anyone heard that term before? Okay, couple of people, great. So Bézier curve named after this guy, Pierre Bézier, who was working at a car manufacturer. And he thought, he was looking at people designing curves for cars, and they were doing this mathematically. So they had to put on graphing paper and do function. He was thinking, this sucks, there's got to be a better way. So this is how he came up with this idea of Bézier curves and these handles that give you a way to control curves much more nicely than graphing paper and all that. And again, it's still used today. If you take this JavaScript logo in SVG and you look at the little C in the SVG of the logo, that's a curve. That's a Bézier curve again. So again, still a thing. So how do they work now? So in order to understand curves, we need to talk about lines first. So there's this concept called linear interpolation. That's a big word, but yeah, it will make it easy. So if you have 2 points, but you want to find a point that's 30% of the way between all of them, let's say again, in this case, just on the x-axis. Give me a value that's 30% of the way between these 2 points. That's what the function does. Again, don't have to know how to code it. This is how it works. You give it 2 values and a percentage, and then it gives you the value at that percentage. Right? So that's just how you can do that. Now, what does it have to do with anything, right? So you can do this across multiple dimensions and all of that. And again, this, earlier we were just doing the x value. Now I'm doing I'm doing size and color and all of this stuff. Again, what does it have to do with anything? Well, let's say, as I said earlier, we had 2 points. We wanted to go from left to right. Now let's say I have this point on the yellow one. The point at the bottom wants to go up. The point on the left wants to go right. So if I'm 50% of the way, and I'm asking for the point halfway there, then I get these 2 points, right? 50% of the way, getting a point. But now, what if I draw a line between these two, and I get another point in the middle of that? And I keep drawing, and I keep drawing, and I keep drawing, and I keep drawing. And this is how I have my curve. And now that point at the top becomes our handle. So when you're moving, again, these curves in Figma and Illustrator and all that, these are our handles. And right now there's just one. Again, and this is what happens when you're all the way at 100%. You have your complete curve. And if you add 2 points, then it becomes really complicated, but it's the same mechanism. And now you have 2 control points, aka 2 handles. And now you get, again, the kind of curve that we saw in the beginning. And this is why if you ever use this cubic Bézier thing in CSS, it makes absolutely no sense. Because you're moving points that are themselves being interpolated twice, which is why it's impossible to wrap your hand around this. Because it's just what? Because you're moving value and it doesn't change the curve. It's what's going on here? And this is why it's impossible to intuit, because as you saw, it's these multiple versions of math thing going on. Yeah. So yeah, here it is. Again, for this one, 2 control points, 2 handles, and now you know how it works. So yeah, final 5 minutes. So now what about text? We've seen the pen, seen the pencil. Now what about text? How do you draw text? Right? So the first thing the computer will ask you to, if you, hey, draw me some text. Well, it's what font do you want me to use? Right? But then the next question we have to ask is, what's actually a font? Can anyone tell me what a font is? Yeah, it's a typeface. Yeah, it's kind of shapes of letters. But if we want to be pedantic about this, Like what's actually behind, it's like a collection of shapes, right? So what people say often to be, a bit sophisticated is to say that it's like an MP3 for a song, right? It's just a representation of something. So it's a binary file that's a representation of a typeface, right? Then what happens if you crack open that binary file? And you'll see there's a bunch of tables, which are just, again, collections of binary data. This differs between the format and all that, but the principle is kind of the same. In that one of these, in this binary blob, one of these tables has something called a set of glyphs, right? And these glyphs are just a set of points. And if you draw these points, you get this for the letter S. Now, I don't know about you, but this kind of looks like, the stuff you draw when you're bored in school, that type of thing. Yeah. So it's not quite that. Like if you gave this to a designer, they would, not be happy. So what's wrong there, right? Like I took the font, I parsed it, I drew the points, and I get this, which is obviously not right. This is not what it should look like. Because it turns out these points, again, are not just like regular points. There are points that have also control points from what we saw earlier with the pen tool. So it's kind of the same thing. These points, if you move them, they're also controlled by these yellow points, which are the same one we saw earlier. So in the font glyph data, you have a collection of points, but also not just a collection of points, a collection of control points, which are these handles that we saw earlier. And this is how you go from, again, like a series of points and controlling curvature and to a complete character. So yeah, so now we saw how computers draw with, again, pencil tools, pen tool, and text. And I have 3 minutes left, so I think that's good. I don't know if there's time for question or not, but yeah. So yeah, it's good for me. This is flashing red, so thank you very much.